Hey, warmer from the low! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you guys. We're going to be joined in a few minutes by one of our good friends in Rocco Miller, who does such great work over at Bracketeer.org. We're going to be chatting with him about what we've all seen here in the offseason. He does a tremendous job of looking at everything from the highest of the high major teams, so looking at these low/mid majors, so you always know that you're going to be able to get great insight out of him, and we're going to also be talking a little bit about what we've been noticing with him in terms of some of these year 2 and year 3 coaches that he feels like might be set up for a big season as well. I know that we talked with him about a week or two ago about some of these year 1 coaches, so want to switch it up a little bit with him. Rocco, just a wealth of information, and we're going to be chatting with him here today on the podcast. Would give you guys the news and notes of college basketball like we saw over the last 24 hours, but transfer portal is really dying out, so we are not getting as much of that right now, but we are getting ourselves set for what is going to be a absolutely tremendous season. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you, for this podcast, you do have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And while I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, everything it is powered by EdgeBoost. Over at EdgeBoost, they are doing a tremendous job of making sure that bettors are able to access their funds anywhere and anytime. And when you go to edgeboost.bet, utilize that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G. That'll give you a dollar for dollar match on your first deposit up to $25. And let's talk with our good friend Rocco Miller. Does such amazing work. Take a look at this amazing game that we all know and love of college basketball. And you're able to follow him on Twitter/X at Rocco Miller, his first and last name, the number 8 all together. And again, over at Bracketeer.org. And Rocco, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Great to be on with you, Greg. How you doing?
I'm doing great. And Rocco, last time we had you on, we were talking some first-year head coaches. How about if we take a look at some of these second-year guys? And for a few guys that you take a look at that maybe things weren't savory for them in year number 1, but they could be on the rise a little bit more. Because I always think that it's interesting when you take a look at some of these situations, and a lot of people like to think, after a bad year 1, that maybe it's not the right hire. But we both know that for a lot of these guys, it takes a little bit more than just one cycle to be able to get things all right and to be able to implement their system.
Absolutely. Well, I think just starting at the top of the sport, there's a lot of optimism for 3 guys in the Big Ten that probably didn't achieve what they wanted to achieve last year. You know, starting with Jake Diebler, you could probably qualify him as a year 2 coach, entering his full second season as the Buckeyes head of the program. They've got a ton of talent coming in and projected to be somewhere around a top 20 team. And obviously he's got to prove himself as a coach and his staff does in close games. They lost a ton of close games last year. They also really struggled to close out games at home. A surprising 6 home losses, Greg, last year. With the return of Bruce Thornton, John Mobley, Devin Royal, Mobley only being a sophomore, so he's got a chance to take a real big jump. We know what Thornton and Royal can bring. They bring over my guy, Christoph Tilley from Santa Clara, and Brandon Noel was a terrific Horizon League player. So I really like their projected starting 5. They've got some great depth. Ajin Awuna is coming off his injury from Baylor, transferred over as well. So this team has a chance to win big, but I think it's more on Diebler because the Big Ten, as you know, Greg, as is many leagues, for the power leagues, especially the way it projects this year, games are going to be really, really tough and really, really tight. So your ability to close out wins in the last 5 minutes, doing little things to put your players in positions to succeed, whether it's out of bounds timeouts or getting in transition, different ways to give your team an edge. That comes back to the coaching staff. So Ohio State is kind of a good place to start that. Then you move on to Washington, who, you know, obviously I'm a Seattle guy originally, so I've got a lot of attention on them. Just a boatload of optimism and talent. I really don't even know exactly how the rotation is going to shake out, but just a ton of options for Danny Sprinkle in year 2, which is a lot different than year 1, of course. Putting a lot of eggs in the Great Osobor basket did not quite pan out. You know, there were certain guys like Tyler Harris, DJ Davis that just weren't healthy the whole year. Of course, Frank Kepnang, who is going to be back this year. But if you're watching the FIBA U19 tournament like me, Greg, you've probably seen Hannes Steinebeck just dominating for Team Germany. They're undefeated still. They won again on July 4th to get to, I think, 4-0 so far in the tournament. He's averaging a double-double. Hard to know exactly what a U19 tournament is going to translate into college basketball-wise, but he has gone up against a couple like college players and completely been the best player on Team Germany. That's exciting. You've got Ognisevich and Peterson, both players of the year in mid-major last year, along with Yates and Claude, who came over from USC, along with assistant coach Quincy Pondexter. So just a ton of excitement around this Washington program. But again, they got to prove it, and this league is going to be brutal. And that leads us to USC themselves with Musselman. Really, for the first time last year, couldn't take a new job with a fresh set of players and really succeed. They had a couple big wins, of course, beating Michigan State. I think they also took out Illinois on the road in a really big upset. But throughout the year, they were very inconsistent. They had they don't have much of a home court advantage at the Galen Center, which I know is extremely frustrating for him. And you look at their roster, of course, highlighted by Rodney Rice and Chad Baker-Mazara, but they have a ton of new blood again, which is no stranger for Coach Muss and his system. So how are these guys going to gel? I know Amarian Dickerson was a ton of fun in the NCAA tournament with Robert Morris, played so well against Alabama and so well in the Horizon tournament. I'm very curious how this goes. Could go either way. It's a make or break year there. And then just real quick, some quick hitters in the same category. Andy Enfield, at SMU, I thought did a great job overall for his first year, but they couldn't win the big game. That kept them out of the tournament picture. They were always on the bubble out for me up until the end. Then they just completely played themselves out in those last 2 weeks. I think they've done a lot to stay huge and stay physical. They've got a real chance to make a move in the ACC. And then a little bit lower in, the totem pole, I guess, with Josh Schertz at St. Louis. He's got a ton of talent. And of course, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I'm saying Kareem if you can't tell. Of course, another year under Schertz will be his third year, and a lot of great additions to support him. So excited for St. Louis's prospects. And then even lower in mid-major, how about all the guys that Jerry McNamara at Siena is bringing back in year two? I think there's a lot of excitement coming in the 150s in Torvik right now, and a real shot to win the Metro Atlantic this year.
Yep, and Siena. I know that they were very, shall we say, less than pleased with the last few rough seasons that they've had, and I think that they're going to be back, and they're going to be back in full force. And I do think that it is always interesting to take a look at these year two teams and how do you gauge which of these guys are going to really be able to ascend/decline and which guys just weren't able to get their system, because I always do think that it is really interesting when a coach takes a new job as to whether or not they're going to stay true to form, or if we see something like, I think that this is a great example, Grant McCaslin, who was playing oh so slow over at North Texas, but he's really been able to find his footing over at Texas Tech because he reformed himself a little bit more and did find a little bit more, shall we say, tempo and a little bit more offense than when he was over at North Texas.
Yeah, no, he did. And I think similar to McCaslin, he'll go into his third year. But, Rick Pitino, obviously, in 2 years at St. John's, has completely reshaped that program, coming off of a Big East championship, a 2 seed in the tournament. And I guess the only part of the season that didn't go according to plan, of course, was the March Madness run ending too soon. But a great team, some argue a top 5 team coming back, and some different pieces and some opportunities to play a little differently with a new backcourt. So definitely got my eyes on St. John's. You saw, Chris Beard's also entering year 3 at Ole Miss. Ole Miss hired him without much of a program prestige as compared to his last 2 stops at Texas and Texas Tech. And they pushed the limits last year to the Sweet 16, almost got to the Elite 8. They played very well for about 35 minutes against Michigan State before falling short. Can he continue to push the envelope as his career continues in such a impressive way, just from a basketball sense? And the Ole Miss roster this year is, again, going to be pretty formidable. I think you go down a little bit. Is this the year where Todd Phillips, a guy I've been very impressed with at Utah Valley, can he win the WAC? They have a really good core back, Leonhardt and Holcomb and Welling as veteran players. They also got Tyler Hendricks, twin brother of Taylor Hendricks, who's in the NBA right now from UCF. And Braden Housley, he played a little bit of a role at Utah State, so coming to the WAC, he should be a bigger factor. They added some good JUCO talent, as well as a couple more transfers from the benches of Utah and Utah State with Karim and Davis. So my wonder there is Grand Canyon, of course, the heavy favorite to win the WAC. I think now that it's past July 1st, it does look like they'll survive and be able to participate in the WAC. But Utah Valley, I think with all their experience, they have a chance here to beat them in the tournament. It's always tough to beat Grand Canyon in Vegas. But I think Todd Phillips has really impressed me. They're sitting there ready to make that next move. And they will be on the move after the year when they go to the Big West. And then I think also you look at Brooks Savage at East Tennessee State. Now, of course, losing Peterson hurts quite a bit. This coach has been a great recruiter even before he became a head coach. He's shown his chops as a head coach, getting the Bucks to the SOCON championship already in the first 2 years. Now he's ready for that next step. East Tennessee State to the Big Dance. He's so young. I think he's still in his 30s. So now he's going to have the challenge of mixing in 4 projected starters. Curious to see how he handles it, because with the returners of DJ Hughes and Alan Struthers, Kai Johnson and Gabe Sisk, those guys could easily start as well. But his new coming class with 3 guys who averaged in double figures in D1 last year, just at lower levels, Jalen Smith from North Florida, Milton Matthews from Florida A&M, and Brian Taylor at SIU Edwardsville. He's got some great options. They should have a good 8-man rotation with those guys. Plus, you still have a couple transfers at 6-7 apiece at Jordan McCollum from Murray State, who didn't get to play much there, but coming, you could argue, down a notch in competition. And Blake Barkley, who was in the Big Ten at Northwestern, didn't see the floor much, but still 6'7" and young. I like those 10 guys. I like Brooks Savage. Obviously, the SOCON is full of great coaches, but I think he's got an upward trajectory after these first 2 years, and I'm curious to see what he does.
Yeah, but I'm so glad that you mentioned ETSU as well, as Rocco Miller does such great work over at Bracketeer.org, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, because I do want to know just how you gauge this conference, because for Furman, they got off to such a nice start to the year last year. Things petered out a little bit on them when they got to SOCON play. Chattanooga, as we know, they have been close but no cigar the last few years in terms of being able to make the NCAA tournament. Haven't been able to do so since Lamont Paris, but obviously what Coach Earl has done over there is rock solid. And then Sanford has really been the big bad wolf in that conference over the last few years, but now they lose their coach over to Mississippi State in old Bucky Ball. And now I think that this is a conference that is just so interesting, especially with Mercer perhaps being one of those teams that is on the come up too.
Yeah, I mean, I've been talking to a lot of the coaches in the league. I've talked to most of the head coaches who are projected at the top of the league. And right now, I think Furman's kind of the common penciled in favorite, if you will, with just a lot of guys back. They do take a hit losing Nick Anderson, PJ Smith, and Garrett Hine as well. So losing those 3 won't be easy to replace, but they do have such a great core back, beginning with, and nobody's really been able to be the primary because, they ran so much through PJ and Nick in the past. So that's where the big mystery lies. But Charles Johnson at 6'11", and both 6'7" Ben Vanderwall, who's played a ton of basketball for Furman, and Tom House as well, they're all seniors coming in. They're all familiar with each other, as well as Cooper Browser, who's a junior at 6'11", and Bronson, 6'4", redshirt sophomore. The whole projected top 8 in the rotation, they do mix in some freshmen, which we'll have to kind of sort out as non-conference plays itself out. But they're all 6'4" and taller, with only Bronson at 6'4". Everybody else is 6'6" to 6'11". So this Furman team will be big. They brought in Asa Thomas as really their only main transfer from just across the other side of town at Clemson, basically. Those 2 campuses are very close in proximity. So I think just with Bob Ritchie's track record and just the amount of continuity, the Paladins are going to start with a head start. But that doesn't mean they're going to win the SOCON tournament, and this will be a 1-bid league, sadly. I would love to see a 2-bid SOCON, but unless like a Furman runs the table in non-conference, we got to be realistic here, Greg. And I do think that means like a Lenny Acuff, who I have the utmost respect for at Sanford, and he will be mostly working with a new cast of characters. He does have Dylan Faulkner, which is pretty huge from that great Lipscomb team last year. He's only a junior, 6'9", that can run a lot through Faulkner. Everybody else there is new. They're going to need the non-conference. They're going to have some ups and downs. But I think once SOCON and January, February start to materialize, this Sanford team could really make a move. I feel the same way with Chattanooga. Of course, Dan Earl, another great coach in the league. Bash Wieland, assuming he's made a full recovery from his injury, that's a great leader. Not only a great leader, but a guy who's been around Earl, with Sean Casano also still there, Colin Mulholland's still there. They've got some nice pieces to work with. Of course, Brendan Watkins played a ton for North Dakota State. Tedrick Washington was a borderline all OVC type of guy at SEMO. And so with Dan Earl's pedigree, I didn't even mention Billy Smith, who shoots near 39% from three on a bad Bellarmine team. I feel like you mix in one guy who came from a losing program, you should be okay. Of course, North Dakota State and SEMO are no slouches. They had good seasons last year. So still a lot of winners on this roster. And bring Billy Smith along, they should be okay. And obviously should be tough by March. So it should be a great league because Greensboro, Wofford as well, and of course ETSU, as we mentioned, they're all going to be in the mix. It should be a heck of a year in the SOCON. I think out of the bottom half teams, VMI was impressive last year, and Andrew Wilson had job offers to leave VMI, decides to stay. I know they couldn't keep all their stars. They lost a couple guys in the portal, but they've got enough there to really surprise some people once again. There's a reason why Wilson stayed. And I also think, Tim Kraft at Western Carolina, a couple of the other guys, obviously Ryan Ritter at Mercer, they're right there ready to make that jump. And I don't think there's a dominant team entering the year. And so the window's wide open for everybody.
Yep, I really think that it is, and I think that is going to be such an interesting conference. I am all here for it after we saw Furman a few years ago win a game in the NCAA tournament, but how about if we talk about something else? These year two coaches that maybe they had a year one, Dusty May, along with Mark Pope, guys like this, and perhaps they can even take a bigger stride forward in year number two. We're going to be chatting about that with Rocco Miller on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast Seats with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Seats with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We're joined by Rocco Miller, who does such great work over at Bracketeer.org. You're able to follow him on Twitter /X at Rocco Miller, his first and last name, the number 8 altogether. And Rocco, how about if we dive in on some of the larger coaches, because we had a lot of coaches that had some good years in year number one. Obviously, Michigan under Dusty May, you had Mark Pope in Kentucky, Louisville, they were able to have themselves a nice year as well. But do you think that there could be a bigger stride forward to be taken for some of these teams? Like, for example, for Michigan, their biggest issue was turning the ball over. You bring in Elliot Cadu, you also bring in Yaxel Lendeborg, that's big for them. Kentucky was a little bit soft down low, bringing in Jaden Quantins from Arizona State, that's massive for them. So I want you to gauge some of these guys that maybe had success in year number one that might be able to have even more here in year number two.
Yeah, no doubt. I'll start with Arkansas and Michigan. I definitely think they'll improve. And as a bracket forecaster, Greg, I'll just look at it in terms of seed. I definitely would anticipate Arkansas to be a much better than a 10 seed. Whenever I get to preseason bracket forecasting, I'm sure they'll be easily a top 4 seed. In fact, I've had the opportunity to talk to their staff about how they like their guys. Obviously, I got to cover them here in San Francisco, but with Billy Richmond, Trevon Brazell, Carter Knox, DJ Wagner, and Darius Acup coming in as a freshman, it's a beautiful rotation. Nick Pringle, I saw him at Alabama 2 years ago. Absolutely fierce competitor. And of course, Ewan's in the mix as well. So this Arkansas team expects themselves to be a top 5 team in the nation. Whether the rest of the media agrees with that or not, I don't think it matters, because that's what their internal expectations are. They are fully geared up and ready to make a charge to win the SEC first place, so the whole 9 yards. So the expectations internally are big time. And Final Four or bust really for this team, which is obviously, even though they made a great run in March last year, could have easily been in the Elite Eight or beyond. Of course, getting stunned by Texas Tech in that Sweet 16 comeback, they expect to go further this year. That's another step forward. Same with Michigan. Sweet 16 last year, 5 seed. Great year overall, especially for Dusty's first year as a Power 5 coach. Now you add Big Yaks to the mix. They've got so many other great pieces around Roddy Gale, and the list goes on. And I expect them to be even better than a 5 seed. And they should be in the mix for the Big Ten championship. So that's a step forward. I think the one at Kentucky, I agree. They're going to be awesome. And he's got so many great pieces. And Owe back is a great gift for Coach Pope. But they were a 3 seed last year. They achieved a lot. I feel like they're just probably going to be about the same as last year. And that's no knock on Kentucky. Being a 3 seed is you're still in great position to get to the Elite Eight, to get to the Final Four and beyond. I feel like they're right in that same range where they left off, and that's a lot harder to do than it sounds. I also agree with you, Greg, on them. I would also say Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, they had an up and down year, but they got a lot of big wins, and it was enough to convince the committee to put them in as a 10 seed. They played well for about 30 minutes against St. Mary's till St. Mary's put the clamps on. Now I think they're ready to make that next step with the additions of Duke Miles, Frankie Collins. Both of those guys have been around forever. But Jalen Washington brings some big size from North Carolina. I'm a big AK or Corky guy from Cornell. Got to see him play a lot. Tyler Harris is an absolute freak of an athlete, who, of course, I saw play a lot at Washington. And then they got Mike James in the mix. He has an embarrassment of riches, actually, at Vanderbilt. And I think this team has the ability to get up into certainly the top 8 seed range, which means that Vandy would be wearing white in the first round of the tournament. But they could actually get up to about a 6 or a 5 seed. That definitely is another step forward for the program. So I like what Byington's got going on. And then I would also say, Kevin Young at BYU, that's kind of a no-brainer. Made a nice run to the Sweet 16, got demolished by playing terrible three-point defense and allowing 25 threes to Alabama, get knocked out last year. But I think it's no secret this year it's a kind of a Final Four bust roster. And, everything he's done this offseason, and they're probably number 1 in the country in NIL. I feel like Kevin Young, it's the sky's the limit now. He will have some distractions. I think when we get to March, there's already rumors starting now of him going back to taking an NBA job, after this year. So we'll see how that shakes out. Can he handle the distractions? Can these players handle the distractions? Are the remaining questions on BYU, but no doubt they've won the offseason. And then I also think Pat Kelsey, a huge step forward, getting away, from the previous regime where Louisville was in the gutter. I feel like now they've got Louisville Nation, Cardinal Nation away from that. A little bit of a disappointing first-round exit, but a tough draw against Creighton. I think now you're at a point where, okay, now not only are we going to get back to the tournament, but we should have a team that's favored to get to the Sweet 16. That's certainly what I expect. I've talked to coaches around the ACC, and Louisville, you could easily argue, is right there in position to get second place. It's either them, North Carolina, or NC State. I see the argument for those 3 being second place, but just the fact that Louisville's in that conversation shows you how amazing of a job Pat Kelsey has done. And I think the last one I'll mention for you, Greg, is Jared Calhoun, the first Utah State first-year head coach in a while to not leave. He's still here. Year 2 in Logan. And what he's been able to do to keep a lot of the talent on board has been very, very impressive. Obviously, Mason Falslev, being a Utah native, could have made a lot of money in the portal, is back. He's got Drake Allen back. He's got Tucker Anderson. Carson Templin wins games for them when he's going unconscious from deep. They add in a Butler transfer and Colby King, who's been around the block, also been at Tulane. And Gary Clark is a great defender coming over from Texas A&M Corpus Christi, and he plays very good offensively as well. I think he makes the Mountain West jump. Utah State, Greg, real chance this year to win the Mountain West.
Yeah, they certainly do. And Utah State just always finds gold with their coaches. It's just all about whether or not they're going to be sticking around for more than 1 year. And this time they were able to find a man in Jared Calhoun who's going to be here for year number 2, and a man that is always here to break down the great game of college basketball, look at everything, and get set for what is going to be an amazing season. That'd be you, Rocco. I know you're working around the clock to be able to get the good people, the schedules out. I know you're doing a great job of prognosticating, taking a look forward to the upcoming season. So let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you, and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
I appreciate it, Greg. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be on with you. Coming up for me, I will be hitting the East Coast early next week. I will be down at the Adidas event. I believe it's called the Adidas Top 100. Recruiting events are not my specialty, I'll be honest. But what they do have is a lot of coaches from D1 that work on scheduling. So for me, it's going to be a great week of spending time with those guys. A lot of them I have not seen in person since the Final Four. There's also still some scheduling opportunities we're all trying to sort out nationally. So I'm excited to get some of those things finalized, and then back to your audience and my audience. Some big games to come. And over on the website, bracketeer.org, that I own and operate, schedule pages are being worked on as we speak. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to see the SEC has been live for the last couple weeks. The Big Ten, probably by the time you hear this, will be within about 24 to 48 hours from that being launched. Then we're off to the Big 12 throughout next week. And those are going to start becoming live all throughout July. And we'll probably have about 10 leagues live by August. So big month for bracketeer.org, just so you can get your plans in order for the 25-26 season. There's several other announcements coming. I'll just keep it at that for now. I know we've gone a little long. You can follow me on Twitter or on Blue Sky at Rocco Miller 8. If you do feel inclined and you love the work we're doing at Bracketeer, we do have a support button now at the top of the website. I appreciate all the support that you guys have been giving these last couple months. Let's keep that going. It's really helping us out. Thanks again, Greg. Appreciate you.
And one of the best minds in all of college basketball is Rocco Miller, putting in so much good hard work on the scheduling front. When it comes to his brackets during the season, when it comes to his bracketology work, he does such an amazing job there. And every single time he joins me, lends incredible insight. So big thanks to Rocco for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM. Naming does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm going to be with you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine, and maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them, from disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.